Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg, and I'm here with the Renaissance man of the Rockies, John Daly. How are you, John?
I'm good, Bernie. How are you doing?
Well, I'm good, except I'm troubled. Whenever you watch the news, you get troubled. So I heard about a story, and I wrote about it this week, about a columnist, a sports columnist out in Seattle for the Seattle Times, Matt Calkins, who wrote a column about transgender athletes. And he wrote it from the point of view of two transgender athletes who thought it was a bad idea for biological men to compete against biological women. Hardly a controversial position to take. The Seattle Times spiked the column. Spiked in journalistic language means they killed it. They wouldn't run it because it was about a trans athlete story. And of course, they'll never admit this, but it was from the wrong point of view. Now, in Matt Calkins' case, he had challenged liberal orthodoxies in sports before, and those stories were also spiked. So he said, you know what? I've had enough of this. I quit. And then he wrote, to explain his position, I'm going to read you a sentence. He said, supporting the separation of biological females and males doesn't automatically make you a transphobic. So let's stop throwing those labels around. Again, a perfectly reasonable position. The reason I found this story so interesting is because the same thing happened to me just a few years earlier at Real Sports on HBO, where I worked for 22 years. I did a story about trans athletes. It was absolutely down the middle fair, had both sides of the controversial issue. It was reasonable and honest and everything good. And I'm not just saying that because I was the correspondent on the story. It really was fair. And the day before the story was supposed to run, we got an email from the main character, a trans woman, long distance runner at a college in the northwest of this country. And she said, if you run the story tomorrow, and she let us know one day before that if we ran the story with her in it, she would sue us. So Brian Gumbel, who was the host of the show and who had the final say on everything, said, let's hold off on this story because we have new corporate owners and we don't know how they'll react. I vehemently disagreed. Gumbel has the final say, so they spiked my story on trans athletes. I've been in this business my entire adult life. That's a long time, unfortunately or otherwise. I've never had a story spiked. So my question for everybody watching us, by the way, I also quit not long after that. So the Seattle Times spikes a story on trans athletes because it's from the wrong point of view. Mine wasn't from the wrong point of view. Mine had everything in it that you could teach it in a journalism class. It was that fair. But they were afraid of what kind of reaction we would get from our corporate owners and what kind of blowback we'd get. So they spiked the story, and I said, I've had enough of this, and I quit also. My question for everybody watching and for you, John, is this is an 80-20 issue. Almost everybody in the United States thinks it's a bad idea for biological males to compete against biological females. Why is this such a hot button issue?
Yeah, especially in the year 2026. So I don't know if you remember this, Bernie, but you actually called me right after Real Sports had spiked the story to sort of vent about it. And yeah, you were not happy, and I didn't blame you at the time. I mean, I thought that was pretty extraordinary. But just kind of going back over, the direction of wokeness in this country, I've argued in my writing before that our nation hit sort of its peak wokeness maybe a year or two into Joe Biden's term. People may remember that the excesses of wokeness were really kind of shooting through the roof during Trump's first term in office, not because of Trump, but I do think in part as a form of like cultural rebellion or resistance to the Trump era. It was sort of the pendulum swing in the other direction. And that was back when preferred pronouns were this really big deal. That's back when Democrats were increasingly using this term Latino instead, or Latinx instead of Latino. And that's when the issue of transgender athletics kind of started to take off. In fact, that spiked Real Sports story that we're talking about, Bernie, I think was in September of 2020, right near the end of Trump's first term. And I think the momentum of the woke era sort of contributed to the fear over that issue. Ironically, I also think
fear because John, what? That people are going to think you hate trans people if you do a story that says that in my case put in some people, not me, but put in some people saying it's a bad idea.
Right.
So automatically you're transphobic?
Yeah, that's what people, the ones that were pushing hard, for trans. Not, I won't even say trans rights, because the rights have always been there. But yeah, there was this, we call it wokeness, we can call it hyper political correctness, but it was really on the climb during that time. And people on the left that were pushing this stuff were really kind of feeling emboldened, and were really intent on shaming those who didn't treat all of these things like with the utmost respect in their view, or the utmost sympathy, or whatever. And yeah, it was kind of a crazy time. I remember, I mentioned earlier preferred pronouns. We don't see that quite as much today, but that was a really big thing at the time, where if you didn't call someone by their preferred pronoun, many on the left would look down on you. It became sort of a mainstream sort of thing. And when you look at the transgender athletics story, ironically, I think it was that particular issue that became sort of the jump the shark moment for wokeness, specifically, this topic of biological males who identified as female competing against biological females in sports. I think that was really sort of an inflection point. So we talk about this 80-20 breakdown. I think that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back.
The 20, John, these are, I'm going to use the word elitists.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very elite, but they're smarter than the average person. They're better than the average. And by the way, they're not smarter or better. But regular folks, people who go to work every day, who are not bigots, they say, this is crazy. This is crazy. And this is why, by the way, it's so crazy that Ennis Cantor Freedom and Royce White are saying, we'll join the WNBA too if you're afraid to define who's allowed in the league and who isn't. Then the reason the WNBA won't define women is because, well, does that mean trans athletes can't play in the WNBA?
Right.
I mean, it's, you know what percentage of Americans are trans? It's like less than 1%. Yeah. This issue is just disproportionately insane. I'm going to tell you, nobody thinks they're a bigot. Well, I'm not a bigot. Okay, I know I'm not a bigot. I wouldn't wash my hands in the same sink with a bigot. And I'm saying it's controversial somehow to say that if you're a biological man, you shouldn't be allowed to compete against biological girls and women. This is nuts. This is just nuts.
It feels like it's especially strange now, because it is 2026. We have seen, I think, the excesses of wokeness have been sort of in decline. And I think part of it, maybe this still the people hanging on to this, we are talking about the Seattle Times. Seattle is notoriously progressive, but I also think, there's, with Donald Trump back in office, I think there's also sort of this hesitancy for people on the left to do what some would consider caving to MAGA. MAGA has been outspoken on the trans issue, so they don't want.
That's a good point.
Yeah, they don't want to hand MAGA ammo, by putting forth even this good faith perspective on the issue that would align with like MAGA sensibilities on the matter.
A good way to know what the 20% on any of these issues is how they're gonna feel is, let's see how Donald Trump feels, and they'll take
Right.
the opposite view.
Yeah. There's
Okay,
something to that. Absolutely.
okay, let's move on. You wrote a column recently, John, about certain things Donald Trump did in just one weekend.
Yes.
Tell me if I have this right. He said he was against the war games being fought with South Koreans and Americans because it offended North Korea, and he
Right.
didn't want to offend. I know it's crazy. He didn't want to offend North Korea. Something about price controls, that Trump was in favor of some kind of price controls, which you'll explain,
Mhm.
and something crazy about the ballroom. You'll go into a little bit of detail, but what struck me about your column is no matter what crazy thing Donald Trump did, the reaction from Republicans in Congress was what, John?
No big deal. Just shrug it off. Either silence. We've seen the Republican Party in the last decade, defend a lot of things in Trump's name, but it's just, so I've written a lot on this topic over the years. How President Trump's policies have become increasingly leftist. He has moved the Republican Party further and further away from Reagan conservatism and closer to what many conservatives feared, at least during the Obama years, would be the end of the road for America. And you brought up some good examples. Our posture with North Korea and South Korea. These are examples I put out, but you touched on them. The issue with price controls, a majority of Republicans, according to a new CBS News poll, actually favors government price controls. Reagan was obviously very much against that. Every Republican, basically up until the Trump years, was against that. There's Trump, on the other hand, has advocated for price controls on prescription drugs and gasoline, and also a cap on credit card interest rates. So this is a big move to the left for Republicans. Same
He
with
also wants literally a piece of the action with big corporations in America if he proposes legislation or executive orders that would help them.
yeah.
And he's saying basically, I helped you, now we want 10% of your company. How is that a conservative position?
Yeah, no, and I did a little bullet list of notes here, Bernie, but just to kind of go through some of the changes that we've seen to the Republican Party over the last 10 years. In the year 2026, the GOP is no longer a free trade party or an economic freedom party. We're now, the Republican Party is now pro-tariff, pro-central planning. As you said, Trump has taken government equity stakes in dozens of private companies now, which is very close to textbook socialism, which Republicans claim to be very much opposed to when it's
What was your example about the ballroom? Do you remember?
yeah, the ballroom. So people may remember that a few months ago, you and I talked about the White House ballroom on this podcast, and at the time, I didn't have big objections, to the renovations, in part because private donors were supposed to pay for this massive expenditure. That's what the Trump administration said. As it turned out, however, that was not true. Taxpayers are actually flipping the bill for most of it, roughly $500 million, without any congressional approval. This was done unilaterally through some tricks with the Trump administration, and Republicans have just been kind of cool with it.
But that's the point that I find so interesting.
Yeah.
How do you is it simply fear of what Donald Trump is going to do to them if they speak up? What is it? What is it, do you think, John?
Well, Republicans in Congress, yes, it's definitely fear. They do not want to ever get on Trump's bad side, which is kind of silly now, especially because Trump's gonna, the midterm, the primaries are over. I guess Trump could still sink certain people's prospects in the general election. But yeah, they're afraid of Trump. They're afraid of Trump supporters who, back Trump on everything. But I think just your average Republican, if they even understand about the story or even know about the story, but those who do are just, well, we always defer to Trump these days. Whatever Trump does, I'm sure he has a reason for it. I'm sure it makes sense. So we'll just, be okay with it. And I just can't imagine, imagine if it were Obama or Biden who had unilaterally torn apart a wing of the White House and then lied about who was paying for it, made the taxpayers pay for it. Republicans would be
I'm gonna write about something along those lines.
okay.
Imagine if it was Biden or Obama on a whole bunch of issues.
Hmm.
If Biden or Obama took a piece of a big tech company from Silicon Valley, if he said we're putting price controls on certain goods and services, if he went to war in Iran without asking anybody, if he tore down the East Wing of the White House without asking anybody, if he wanted to build an arch, you can. The list is long.
Yeah.
What if Biden or Obama did that? What would the reaction be, not only from Republicans in Congress who would use that in election campaigns, but what about regular Republicans? Not even the MAGA crowd, regular. What would everybody who voted for Trump, what would their reaction be? Damn sure wouldn't be the reaction we're getting now when Trump does it.
Yeah, I have 10 years of examples of this stuff, and I think if you want to contrast it with something, the last Republican president prior to Trump was, of course, George W. Bush, and people may remember in his second term when he nominated Harriet Miers for the Supreme Court, and the conservative movement and Republicans said, "Yeah, I don't like this idea because she's not really conservative, she's not this constitutionalist," and he changed his mind. They put pressure on him and he changed his mind, and we ended up, I think, with a better justice, a better nominee. And but we don't do that anymore. And I say I haven't been a Republican in a while. I've been a conservative for a very long time and continue to be. But there is no pressure on Trump from within the Republican Party to do things that are conservative, and so he hasn't been doing. I mean, he's a New York liberal. He's a big government guy. He has been all of his life. And that's the direction he's dragged the GOP. And I say dragged, more like willingly guided them, in this direction. But we could go on and on all day. We get a few conservative wins here and there from the Trump administration, mainly in the first term. But this is all stuff that, from trade policy to even the pro-life movement, he's kind of throwing them under the bus. And there's just not a lot of conservatism left in today's party.
Let me quote myself. Profiles in courage, understandably, are hard to come by. Understandably. But profiles in cowardice are a dime a dozen.
Yeah. And I'll just add one thing too, Bernie, because we get called whenever I point out stuff like this, this stuff that Trump does that's the opposite of conservatism. People tell me that that's because I'm a liberal, that I'm saying. So, and I always say that to you too, Bernie. And it's
so depressing.
It is. Please, I'm begging people, kind of look back at what was the conservative movement from like the 1950s up till about 2016. Tell me, do you no longer think that was conservative, or do you, because we're going in the opposite direction now and have been for some time?
Give Trump credit for having such a powerful personality.
He does.
A Svengali-like personality, that people who would oppose 100 things he's done in the last month, if Biden or Obama had done them, just sit back and go, yeah, that sounds good to me. I find that so sad, so pathetic. And I'm not calling Trump supporters who are listening to us and who, even the ones who aren't, I'm not saying they're pathetic. That's not what I'm saying. Right. I'm saying it's pathetic if you criticize Biden or Obama for something and praise Donald Trump for the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think in our politics, we don't really punish hypocrisy anymore, and I think that's been a poor development. I think having single standards matters, and and it's not just the right, obviously. The left is the same way. It is they withhold their side from the standards, they apply it to the other side, and it's worse now than it's ever been.
Yeah, all that matters is let's see what the other side, let's see how they feel about it, and we'll take the opposite position.
Yeah.
Right.
If we're upsetting the other side, we're doing something right. Right. So that's the game now.
Bingo. Okay, let's move on to our final topic. The midterms are just about a month away. And the midterms are a report card on the president. Well, the president's report card is he's getting F's all over the place. His poll numbers are way down. They're in the 30s, either high 30s or low 30s, but that's not good. So my question for everybody listening, and again for you, John, should Donald Trump go out and campaign with Republicans running for re-election? Republicans run, or not even re-election, Republicans running for Congress to try to beat Democrats. I'll give you my position very briefly. Donald Trump is too unpopular. If he wants to go to a ruby red district and campaign with a Republican, fine. But that Republican probably doesn't need Donald Trump anyway. But he's too unpopular. He's too disliked. He's not going to help Republicans. He's going to hurt them. Now, one last thing before I throw to you, John. Donald Trump does gin up Republican voters. He gets them out to vote. That's a good thing. But you know who else he gets out to vote? Democrats. Nobody energizes Democrats more than Donald Trump. So if you're going to say, well, getting him out there is going to get a lot of Republicans to vote, and that's a good thing, it's also going to get a lot of Democrats out to vote, and that's a bad thing. I think on balance, stay home, Mr. President. You're too unpopular. You're not going to do Republicans any favors by campaigning with them.
Yeah, no, I largely agree. I can't think of a political upside for Republican candidates to have Trump out there. As you say, in deep red districts, Republican candidates, or they're going to win anyway. You know, they don't need Trump. So maybe if Trump wants a sound bite for some other reason, he can do this. But for the districts that aren't deep red, I think Trump can only hurt Republican candidates at this point. So, you know, I feel like this is sort of a similar, or should be a similar political calculation to when Trump refused to participate in the 2024 GOP presidential primary debates. You know, his team decided, you know, you can only hurt yourself if you go out there and you're challenged by these other candidates. There's, you know, you're very popular with Republican voters. You're leading all the polls. There's no reason for you to go out there and hurt your own prospects. Then again, I've said many times, Trump cares much more about his personal prospects than the prospects of the Republican Party. But I think there's no real benefit to either him or the party itself if he were to do this. So my guess is that he won't do many of these stops, but you know, maybe the deep red ones he'll do. But I don't think it makes sense. Not for
Here's another problem. He'll go to a rally. He'll talk for 22 hours, and he'll talk about stuff that has nothing to do with the candidate he's supposedly supporting.
Right.
And the headline will be one thing he said that wasn't on the teleprompter that makes all the news because he wants to take over Greenland or Canada or rename Lake Ontario, Lake America. You hear about that one, John?
No, but it doesn't surprise me one bit.
So that'll be the headline, and he'll hurt the candidate he's out campaigning. I mean, let's remember January 2021 when he went to Georgia to campaign, supposedly campaign for two Republican Senate candidates, and two progressives won in Georgia.
Yeah.
Progressives won in Georgia because Donald Trump told voters that the election in 2020 was rigged.
Right.
So they figured, if it's rigged, why am I going out to vote? And they sat home. They sat home, and two progressives won in Georgia. Mm-hmm. He's going to do more harm than good.
Oh yeah, and it's there's other examples of that too. He talked Herschel Walker into running for the Senate, Dr. Oz. And both those people lost, and it's just
If
there is just no.
Tallarico wins in Texas, if or as Trump calls him, Talafrico, if he wins in
I heard
Texas,
that one.
if Texas becomes a red state,
Or blue state, you mean?
a blue state, if Texas, which has always been a red state, at least in the past
Mhm.
20 years or so, goes blue, that's entirely on Donald Trump
Yeah.
for endorsing Paxton, a guy who has enough, he's carrying enough baggage to open up a luggage store, a Samsonite luggage store at the mall.
Right.
Uh, if Tallarico wins, that's going to be a perfect example of why Trump needs to shut his mouth and stay out of the midterms.
Right. Right. And the good news for Republicans on that is that we've been forecasting. Now we analysts have been forecasting Texas perhaps turning blue for a number of election cycles now, and it never quite happens. But I think this will be the test, because I think Tallarico's in a better position than the people like Beto and all those others were in. And yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I think this is probably the best shot Democrats will have, and will have had in a long time. So yeah, that's worth paying attention to.
All right, you want to make a pitch?
Yeah. So we have and I've mentioned this earlier in the month, but we have a summer, it's a Dog Days of Summer sale going on right now on BernardGoldberg.com. 50% off an annual membership. That's just $25. I think that breaks down to like just a little over $2 a month when you look at it that way. But you get all kinds of exclusive content from Bernie, his columns, his time machine trips. You get the comment section. You get a number of other things that free subscribers don't get. So we want to encourage people to upgrade to a premium membership, an annual membership, and we think you'll like it.
And a gift to people you like or people you don't like.
Yep, the sale also works for giving a gift to other subscribers. So yeah, if you, as Bernie likes to say, if you want to annoy your liberal friends, get them a subscription to the site. But if you want to, if you just appreciate the honesty here and the problems we have with hypocrisy on this website, and the what we write about and talk about, yeah, we would love for you to join us.
I've said this before. In terms of, I'll define success by the scope of the membership of subscribers. That's how I'm defining success for the moment. If we took a different take, if we went all in on Donald Trump, everything he did was great, or nothing he does is great, we would do a lot better, because that's where it is on social media these days. Honest journalism doesn't do as well as partisan journalism. I'm not going the partisan route. I'm going to criticize Trump when I think he deserves it, and I'm going to praise him, and I'm going to criticize liberals when I think they deserve it. I've talked about recently social democrats and how crazy they are, and that's what you get on this website.
Yep.
But we would do a lot better if we just jumped on the Trump bandwagon or jumped on the liberal bandwagon. If that's what you want, you're in the wrong place.
Right. Well said.
Okay. That's it. Didn't mean to go on as long as I did. Apologies for that. Until next time. See you around. Have a great rest of I'll see you in 2 weeks, but we'll be right up against the midterms when we come back. So we'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.